So you seem to say that there is a principle that we should avoid maximal suffering for conscious creatures. So do we agree that you are not deriving that principle from what is? It's an extra little bit of axiom?
Yeah, I mean, so he's putting it in a very simple way that we should avoid maximal suffering. And where did you get this from Matters of Fact?
No, I would say that, like every other scientific discipline, a science of value in this sense does have to pull itself up by its bootstraps.
It's called epistemic bootstrapping. This is the problem that you hear us bring up all the time. And he's realizing the problem. Like, yeah, I'm going to have to find something to start with to kind of pull myself up. But epistemic bootstrapping projects don't work, especially when we're talking about futile human autonomous systems, system building systems like basic bitch naive empiricism, right?
With some axioms. So, physics has axioms.
I'm going to have to epistemic bootstrap with some axiom. This is called foundationalism. How often do you hear me critiquing foundationalism? And isn't it funny that Sam Harris and Stefan Molyneux and Trent Horn and T-Dump and Azrar Rashid all have the same position to start their natural theology project? And yes, every one of them can do a form of natural theology. Did you not realize that the Enlightenment philosophers did natural theology? They just dispensed with the God of the natural theology system. And here we have public intellectuals repeating the same stupid shit for the last 500 years. It's amazing. It's amazing. And you would think you would be able to show them, as we've shown in every one of those debates that I've listed, all the people that we debated, the same issue has come up, the same issue that's coming up now, tonight with him. And they resort to saying, just give me my axiom self-evident starting point to build my foundationalist system. And all I have to do is do the same thing that he's doing. Again, even though Sean Carroll isn't a presuppositionalist, he's doing what I would do. Okay. How are you going to justify the axiom, the starting point, this thing that you want me to grant you? I'm not going to grant you. Why am I going to grant you that? What are you talking about? This is not car salesmanship. This is not, haggling at the parking lot over the Mercedes. This is philosophy. You don't get stuff granted. This is debate. I grant you stuff. What are you talking about?
Things like the value of understanding the world in a logically coherent way, or even in a way that doesn't seem logically coherent, but is incoherent by some other logic that we can't intuit, right? So, as is the case with quantum mechanics. So there's some brute fact of epistemology. There's some.
And there we have it. The same thing he said to Jordan Peterson 4 years later. The same thing I constantly critique. Oh, really? A brute fact. As an empiricist, can you please give an account for your brute fact and explain to me how the words mean and how the principles obtain over time and how this and that? They'll never do it. They can't.
Yank of the bootstraps that has to get your
epistemic bootstrapping, self-evident axioms. Give me my starting point, please. Let me pull myself up my bootstraps. You can't. It'll never work. It's impossible. Because it's too much of a tall order, right? For an individual finite being whose conceptual scheme is completely a construct to give an account for universal claims? It's impossible. You'll never get there. This is another one of David Hume's points. From this inductive point to this inductive point to this inductive point, it doesn't matter how many finite sense data, pieces of data you have, you will never be able to leap to the universal cause or claim or principle on empiricist grounds. It's a very simple point. So you might believe in all of these universal principles, but you can't justify them. But now, wait a minute. I thought we were going to be rationalists and reasonable evidence-based people who only believe what the evidence supports. But now we're believing in all these things to be evidentialist empiricists that we can't evidentially prove. Let's give the classic example. All knowledge comes through sense data, right? Empiricism 101, the most basic bitch presupposition of naive empiricism. Where in sense data do you prove that proposition itself? Where in sense data are you told that all knowledge comes through sense data? All knowledge, that is a universal claim. There's nothing that tells you that. So it's an arbitrary starting point that attempts to build an entire system, and the arbitrary starting point is unjustified as an empiricist, on empiricist's own grounds. There's no basis to make the move from empirical sense data as an individual finite mind to saying all knowledge comes through sense data. Do you see this? This is a very simple, very clear, self-evident truth. I'm joking when I say that. But it should be self-evident in the sense that it should be, truth is self-attesting, we could say, right? So that there should be a kind of inner intuitive sense that that's false, right? Just like we intuitively inner sense that 2 + 2 is not 5. Do you see this point? Atheists, this is a very simple argument. It refutes 99% of you. Do you hear this? Right?
Where he started. And I actually can find nothing more fundamental from my point of view than the fact of consciousness, the fact that something seems to be happening. I mean, this is compatible with us being confused about everything else, right? This could be a simulation, we're in the matrix, we're a brain in a vat, this is a dream, I'm the only one who exists. All of that's possible. I could be radically confused, mistaken about everything, and yet the one thing I can't be confused about, the one thing that can't be an illusion, is that something seems to be happening.
So, I mean, it's like these people have never read beyond like a cursory analysis of philosophy. I mean, anybody with any sense can see and learn that Descartes' cogito, or the variations of the cogito, have been savagely demolished for centuries. Even Bertrand Russell demolished this. To say that my one brute fact that I'm going to start with is something seems to be happening to me assumes a host of things. I hope you guys see this, right? Something. What? It's like he didn't even realize that he's assuming that sentences have meaning when he says this. To say these propositions assume that sentences and propositions are meaningful, dude. It assumes that words have meaning. It assumes that you as an individual exist and have. Remember, he's talked about all kinds of things that he hasn't justified. Yeah, he talks about consciousness. I mean, your whole discipline, right, has not and is basically surrendered the fact that we can't make sense of consciousness as a materialist. But he just assumes, right, that there's consciousness is occurring. What does that even mean, dude? Remember, the scientism positivist approach has to cut off any words that you can't kind of paste in a one-to-one correspondence to a physical object. That's how some of those positives, right? Remember how stupid that Carnap Ayer level stuff got, right? That we covered in Two Dogmas. And yet here he is making all these metaphysical claims. Consciousness is occurring. What? And remember Quine's great criticism at the end of the paper? For you to say consciousness is occurring at time t is literally the equivalent of fairy tales in terms of justification. In terms of justification, empiricists making metaphysical claims and assertions, universal claims, has the exact same epistemological justificatory status as the Greek gods. That was the point at the end, one of the points, at the end of Two Dogmas. So Sam just doesn't get it.
That's what I'm calling consciousness. And then the only other axiom to add is that there is a difference between the worst possible state of consciousness and the best.
So he's got two axioms that he thinks are self-evident. Things are just occurring, to me, I think he said, and we should avoid the worst possible situations. Number one, first of all, you can't justify or give an account for all the things that were assumed in the first proposition, as we just saw, right? The critiques of the cogito. And the second proposition, or axiom, excuse me, does not follow from this one. So, and there's no necessary connection or relation between these two. Consciousness is occurring, therefore I ought to avoid the worst situations. What? It doesn't follow. And the fact that he's not, we're asking for how you know that there's good and bad, better, worst. What is the criterion, the delineation problem? This is oftentimes brought up in these kinds of epistemology issues where people make these kinds of statements, and then the philosopher says, well, but that assumes that you have a prior criteria by which to sort out different types of truths or propositions or different types of knowledge or different types of claims or different types of values. So what is the basis for the delineation criteria, which is prior to you actually delineating, well, these are the self-evident truths and these are the non-self-evident truths, right? It's a problem you can ask to a foundationalist. Oh, really? So you have a prior criteria by which you can sort out the self-evident truths from the non-self-evident truths. Okay, but if that's a prior criteria, then it's not, then it's prior to the ones that were self-evident, you see. So it begs, then the ones that are self-evident actually aren't self-evident. They actually require and are based on another more fundamental proposition about the delineation criteria.
If anything matters, that difference matters. That's where ethics come in. And
that's begging the question. We ask for a justification, and he says, what matters is what matters. We can see where T-Dump gets his, ideological underpinnings of this kind of stuff. Hume Pod 2100 early adopter $2. Mr. Dyer, we would like to inform you that the Hume Pod will be shipped tomorrow and will be arriving within 1 month. A signature will be required upon delivery. Thank you for your patronage. Thank you, Hume Pod bot over there at Amazon.com. Morals be simple, dog. $3. Meta ethics can't get off the ground with normal people because once you say the worst possible misery for everyone might not be bad, you've lost them. Yeah, but that's why you have to stress the point of what justification is in philosophy. People don't care about grounding their moral beliefs. They're relativistic. Yeah, exactly. But if they want to adopt those things, then you just simply point out to them that they can't argue. There's no such thing as argumentation, and their own position is self-refuting. And if you can show people that their position is self-refuting, then you've done your job as an apologist. That's the point here. No, you're not going to convert everybody. That's true. A lot of people are going to think that they can willfully choose relativism and subjectivism, but what can you do? Ultimately, you just pray for them. Jay, you mentioned in a previous video that all competing worldviews of non-orthodox can be easily reduced to a handful of refutable starting points. Monism, dualism, yeah, exactly. Most of them. Would you mind listing the most prominent ones? Those are the most prominent ones. Most people's worldviews are a form of monism, a form of dualism, or one of these other kind of dead-end positions like solipsism. So you yourself listed them. I mean, most of the world religions affirm a form of monism or dualism. Buddhism, Shintoism, Hinduism. Okay? They're either monistic or dualistic. People like Harris and these kinds of people, they end up in solipsism. Many of the Enlightenment philosophers' positions, Kant, Hume, they end in solipsism if you follow through with them. Descartes. Those Enlightenment philosophical positions are solipsistic. Because if you follow the history of Western philosophy, especially with Hume and Kant, you can no longer justify belief in an external world. Okay, well, if there's no external world, there's a divide between the phenomena and the noumena, then I'm just stuck in my own mind. Reality is just a projection of my mind. At least that's the best I could do. I might not like that. I might think there's an objective, commonly experienced world out there, but I can't prove that. I can't know that. That's the dead end of those positions.